Donald Trump is playing a foreign policy game that is much more complex than people realize. Yes, Donald Trump. Complex. A lot of people would reject that notion. Some of his detractors, they think he is too impulsive, undisciplined to actually have a coherent and complicated foreign policy, but he actually does, and that is what I want to break down in this video. Now, what does Donald Trump want generally? He wants peace and prosperity, but in Washington, D.C., peace is a bad word, and if you are president, you are constantly being pulled toward different conflicts. And right now, there are three main areas where Trump is navigating the pull toward war. And that, of course, is Russia, Ukraine, Israel, and all the wars they want to fight, and then China. Now, let's start with Russia. Trump knows that this war with Russia is pointless. As I've explained in previous videos, the neocons, the West, the globalists, they have wanted to destroy Russia for decades now, especially when Putin got into power. Their plan was to push Russia into a war that would lead to their economic and political collapse. And once that happened, if it did happen, we could break up Russia, and Russia would cease to be a threat or a perceived threat to the West. That was the plan, and it failed miserably. Russia is not going anywhere. They will continue to be a world power with a massive stockpile of nuclear weapons. So from Trump's perspective, this entire war was just stupid, a waste of time, money, and lives. So he wants to move on from it. And he also knows from his first term that a lot of the intelligence on Russia, reasons given for why we need to fight Russia, are simply false. And he knows that because the intelligence, his own intelligence, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, lied about him and his associations with Russia. In his first term, he was called a traitor, a Putin stooge. And he knows that that was all false. So a lot of things that he was told by his director of national intelligence at the time, his CIA director at the time, were false and were meant to mislead him and push him into conflict with Russia. And when he tried to pull back in Ukraine by withholding weapons, he was impeached. So he knows that so much of the hatred toward Russia and the things said about Russia, a lot of it is simply not true. And then he has his own personal experience with Putin. And if you read between the lines and you see how Trump talks about him, it would seem to me, or it seemed to be obvious, that he generally respects Putin, and that in their conversations together, he has found Putin to be a fairly reliable partner, in contrast to somebody who he finds to be completely unreliable. And that person is Volodymyr Zelensky. So think about that. The West is calling Putin the devil, mass murderer. Zelensky is the Winston Churchill of our time. But then Trump, from his own experience, knows that if I had to pick one person to deal with to get something done, that person is not Zelensky. That person is Vladimir Putin. So in his mind, he goes, I can work with Putin and we can end this war and move on to bigger business, which is making money, having peace, having economic deals, and not wasting our time in a senseless war. And just to prove this point about Zelensky being unreliable, of course, we know about the White House meeting. But during Trump's State of the Union, he read part of a letter from Zelensky that demonstrated, or at least came off like it was trying to advocate for peace and working together. And Trump sort of held that up as a sign that, okay, here we go. Perhaps Zelensky is coming back to the table and being reasonable. Well, what did he do today? He released a video from back in Kiev where he essentially outlines conditions for negotiations that he knows the Russians would never, ever accept, meaning that Zelensky is essentially kicking over the table and making it impossible for there to be negotiations. So everything he said in that letter, he's basically blowing up again. And that is because, in part, all of the support he's getting from the European leaders, he's feeling more confident about having any aid that he loses from the United States being replaced by the Europeans. But I want to play this video and show you exactly what he said. And the demands he makes, or the things he says that are off the table, if they are, there is no peace to be had. There is no negotiations to be had. So he's really, once again, spitting in Donald Trump's face. And that's a bad thing to do because Trump is vindictive and he's already tired of dealing with Zelensky. So here's what he said. And it's Ukrainian, so I'll try to read over it. One last thing. We know that the Russians have not changed their positions or demands regarding Ukraine. They will insist on reducing our army. They will seek illegal renunciations of our territories, as well as a significant political deformation of Ukraine with the weakening of the Ukrainian constitution. But I will say that, in fact, as long as we all in Ukraine stand together and stand strong, as long as we are here, no one will succeed in this. Peace will be dignified. Glory to Ukraine. So if Zelensky is unwilling to relinquish territory that he's already lost in this war, then there is no peace. And that's why I said in my previous video that you cannot deal with Zelensky. He is an agent of chaos. And when you deal with an agent of chaos, it just drags you down too. So Trump should stop dealing with this guy and move on from him. And I also said that Trump needs to move quickly and not allow this whole war to just stagnate for months and months and months, especially as if it moves into next year and we have midterms, because the media will use a Ukrainian loss as a weapon against Trump and the Republicans in the 2026 midterm. So he needs to move fast, and that seems to be what he's doing, because right after I made that video, we got reports that he had stopped aid, but then we also got reports from today that he suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine, and that is significant because we provide real-time information on Russian positions. We help them with targeting with the HIMARS. So that is very significant. And like I said, if we did this and Ukraine loses or starts to lose, the media is going to turn, and they've already done that. We have this headline from a paper in the UK. Ukraine's troops dying because U.S. cut aid, say soldiers on front line. So they're already blaming Trump for soldiers being killed and Ukraine having a tougher time. So again, if Trump wants to end this war, or at least untangle the U.S., he has to do this quickly, in my opinion. And it seems that is exactly what he is doing. Now, there's another reason why Trump wants to improve relations with the Russians, besides the fact that he wants to just stop the killing. And that is because of Israel. And this is the tricky one, because of the three, China, Russia, and Israel, trying to shape foreign policy on Israel that goes against the neocons in the Israel lobby is extremely difficult. And this is where Trump has to be very, very cunning. And it seems that he is. Now, one thing he's doing when it comes to Israel is he's being very bellicose with his statements, especially when he talks about Hamas. He says, we're going to destroy Hamas. They better not mess with us. You do what I say or we're going to crush you. But then later we do something that isn't quite so aggressive. So, for example, we have this post from Truth Social today from Trump, and it says this: Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. You can choose release of all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it's over for you, over in all caps. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. I am sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. I have just met with your former hostages whose lives you have destroyed. This is your last warning for the leadership. Now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance. Also, to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision. Release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. Well, that is pretty tough talk, right? And that placates the Israel lobby, who, again, is very, very powerful in the United States. However, again, he makes those statements, then does things that are a little less aggressive. Going back to the start of his administration, or even before it started, he sent his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and basically told him, stop the war now. We need a ceasefire. And he really strong-armed Netanyahu, if that's possible, into doing so. So his public statements and his actions aren't quite the same. Another thing he's done is he has talked to Hamas directly. And this was reported from Axios, U.S. holding secret talks with Hamas. And the sources were anonymous, but now we have this update saying that, in fact, the U.S. was actually speaking directly with Hamas, and that we had consulted Israel when we did this. And it says here, this is funny, the Israeli Prime Minister's office said in a statement, during talks with the U.S., Israel expressed its opinion about the issue of direct talks with Hamas. Clearly, Israel does not want us talking to Hamas directly, and they expressed their opinion. But we did it anyway. So again, we say, or Trump says one thing very loudly in public, but then he's doing something else quietly. Now, another thing about Russia that's important is that Russia and Putin could actually help keep Israel contained when it comes to war with Iran. And that is a very important thing because that is what Israel has been harping on now for almost 30 years, especially Benjamin Netanyahu. So if Russia and the United States end the war, or at least have diplomatic relations again, Russia could be instrumental in preventing a bigger conflict in the Middle East. So we have this article from the Times of Israel. As Trump cozies up to Putin, Russia offers to mediate U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. Russia has agreed to assist U.S. President Donald Trump's administration in communicating with Iran on various issues, including on Tehran's nuclear program and its support for regional anti-U.S. proxies that largely also seek Israel's destruction. And here is the money shot right here. The news is potentially deeply worrying for Israel, which has sought Trump's support for a credible military threat against Iran aimed at pressuring it to abandon its nuclear ambitions, but may now be stymied by the U.S. leaders' increasingly cozy relationship with Putin. So obviously, Times of Israel is an Israeli paper, and they say clearly here that they're worried. Oh my God, if Putin and Trump get along, then they might prevent a war with Iran because Iran and Russia have a fairly close relationship, and Russia can exert pressure on Iran. And if Trump can exert pressure on Iran through Putin, then we might be able to avoid a larger conflict in the Middle East. And once again, peace is a bad word when it comes to the neocons, when it comes to Washington, D.C., and the Israeli lobby. So they're quite worried that a softening of issues between the U.S. and Russia could lead to peace in the Middle East, which is what they don't want. Very, very sad, but that is, where we're at in our history, where any talks of peace immediately get you attacked. So Trump, again, theme of this video, Trump is playing a complex foreign policy game, and Russia is an important part of it as far as keeping Israel contained. So for all of you people out there who keep thinking that Trump is just a slave to the Israeli lobby and just doing whatever Israel wants us to do, well, it's more complex. Publicly, in his statements, that's the way it comes off. But then, behind the scenes, he's actually doing things that the Israelis don't want us to do, which is talk directly to Hamas, talk to Putin, to talk to the Iranians, so we cannot have war. And last thing about Israel, we have the Gaza situation, and Trump angered some people with his Trump Plaza plans for Gaza, where he rebuild it and turn it into one of his casinos. Well, after he did that, of course, the Arab nations rejected what he said, and most people, did as well. And again, I never took it seriously, so it didn't bother me. Some people freaked out. Oh my God, this is ethnic cleansing. How dare he say this? He wants to throw them out and build casinos. He's messing with people. Again, misdirection. So after he did that, do I have it here? Oh, maybe I don't have it. After he did that, there was a counteroffer by the Arab nations to invest tens of billions of dollars to rebuild Gaza without moving the Gazans out. And, well, the U.S. and Israel rejected that plan. So both sides have rejected each other's plans, but that's how negotiations work. You make one offer, and then they reject it, make their offer, and you go back and forth. So I'm hopeful that eventually they get to a place where not everybody's going to be happy. I guarantee you that. There are people who are not going to be happy with what happens, but it's a place where we can at least live with it and hopefully not have more death and destruction. So, but let's keep an eye on Gaza and this hostage situation, because certainly Netanyahu would love nothing more than to resume bombing that place. If you can't tell, I am not the biggest fan of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, finally, we have the issue of China, and we just put some tariffs on China, and China's talking pretty big right now. They're pretty excited about it, and they said that tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, China says it's ready to fight the U.S. until the end. And I would expect them to say that. What else are they going to say? That they don't want, they're going to lay down for us? Of course not. Now, what does Trump want? Does Trump want a war? Of course not. The situation with Russia and Ukraine is not much different than Taiwan and China. But what Trump wants to do is reconfigure the U.S. economy in order to discourage any need for conflict with China. So the tariffs are aimed at rebuilding U.S. manufacturing. There's also the issue of national security during the pandemic. Some of our vital things we needed came from China, and that gave them power over us. So another reason why we need to change our supply lines and where things are produced so that we don't have that issue. And when it comes to Taiwan, one of the issues with Taiwan and why it's a valuable place to control is their manufacturing of chips. Now, the largest company in the world that does that is TSMC, and it was just announced that they are investing $100 billion to build more plants in the United States to manufacture here. So I think Trump's plan for China is to make it difficult for China to have any economic leverage over us by, again, reshaping the U.S. economy to manufacture and to have valuable things like these chips made in the United States, so that if China were to encircle Taiwan and cut it off, that it wouldn't have as much effect on the U.S. as it otherwise would if we didn't have these investments in our own country. So is fighting a war, an economic war against China, in order to actually not fight a real war. Because again, like Russia, you have a large nuclear power, and any war would just obviously end the entire planet if nuclear weapons are used. And Taiwan, like Ukraine, the United States is not going to risk nuclear war to save Taiwan. And I hope you're listening, Taiwan. Don't allow yourself to be sacrificed for U.S. neocons who want to use you as a weapon against China. Just like Ukraine, it will end badly. And I'm hopeful that Trump will avoid any direct confrontation and will use other means to battle with China, if that, in fact, is what we need to do. I'm not quite sold on the idea that we need to have an economic war with China, but I do understand why we need to remove some of that leverage when it comes to manufacturing, because of what we saw during the pandemic. So I'm all for that. And again, too, this tariffs, they're reciprocal. I always point this out. People act like tariffs were invented 2 weeks ago by Donald Trump. Every country in the world, China, India, Canada, they all have tariffs on the United States. And Trump is, in many cases, just reciprocating by putting tariffs on them. So I find it fascinating that if tariffs are so bad, if they're so terrible, if they're so destructive, why does every other country have them on the United States? Clearly, they derive some benefit for themselves. And Trump understands this, so does his economic team. And like he said, in the short term, there will be some shockwaves. When you are reshaping an economy as large as the United States, that is going to happen. However, eventually it'll pay off, and that might take a year, no longer than that, I think 2 or 3 years, but ultimately it will protect the U.S. economy and allow us not to be reliant on foreign countries that may or may not have an adversarial relationship with us. So we just need to hold on, not get too excited, and see how it all plays out over the next 12 to 24 months. But I am encouraged. I think we're heading in the right direction. And I think Trump, again, is playing a fairly complex game when it comes to foreign policy, to avoid war, to bring peace, and to bring prosperity to the United States. Well, that is it for now. If you are new to the channel, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.